Wonderland Elementary, this is Art News with Edna Egelhofer.
Good evening, I'm Edna Egelhofer, and this is Art News, the hard-hitting news network where we interview the most famous contemporary artists to hear about their work. Today's artist who we're interviewing is an artist by the name of Glenn Ligon. Glenn is an American artist based in New York City, and his work takes a lot of inspiration from texts or language to investigate issues of race, language, history, and identity. Glenn, welcome to the show. Now, how did you first decide to become an artist? Did you draw a lot when you were a kid?
I didn't really do drawings when I was a kid. I made copies of things. So I had a good business when I was a kid doing drawings of cartoon characters from the newspaper, and I would cut them out and sell them to my friends in school. When I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to be an artist. And my mother had sent me to after-school classes at the Metropolitan Museum. And I think my mother sent me to art classes because she thought that's what a well-rounded citizen should have education in.
I agree. Art class is incredibly important. You use a lot of words and texts from books in your art. Have you always loved books?
It was the one thing that when I was a child, my mother would allow me any book I wanted, no matter the cost. Expensive toys or clothes, no, but any book. So that kind of attention to books was, love of books came early.
Talk more about your text paintings. How did you start making these messy abstracts?
First text paintings I made were single sentences by an author named Zora Neale Hurston, an African-American woman, a writer of the Harlem Renaissance. The way I was making the paintings was to use plastic letter stencils and oil crayons. If you're using letter stencils, you're trying to make something with a sharp boundary, but oil crayons want to break out of those boundaries. They're messy. They don't keep their shape. And for about 6 months, I think, I tried to figure out how to make these oil crayons make nice, neat letters. And then I realized that the fact that they didn't make nice, neat letters was actually much more interesting. Smudging them and transforming these letters into abstraction was what the paintings were about. But it took 6 months to figure that out.
6 months is a long time. Were you ever frustrated that it took too long until you made something that felt successful?
Ideas take a long time to be born. They take a long time to gestate. They take a long time to come into the world. And that process is hard.
Aha! So, in your opinion, is it okay to make mistakes when you're making art?
The struggle is always the idea you have in your head about what you want to say in your work versus the means you have to say it with, or your abilities, or your skills, or the technical limitations of the medium you're working in. So there's always sort of like the ideal painting in your head, and you never quite get to that. And so you make something, and it's almost there, it's not quite right. You make something else. It's almost there, it's not quite right. You make something else. It's almost there, it's not quite right. But that process doesn't end, Eventually, just that is the process. You just keep going.
How are your mistakes helpful to you?
I often find that when I'm working It's the mistakes, or it's someone else's suggestion or intervention that pushes the work forward. It's the things that I didn't think I was going to do that end up being the thing.
Going back to the topic of childhood, you did a series of paintings based on how kids color in coloring books. Can you talk a little bit more about this project?
There's a series of paintings called the coloring book paintings, which were based on kids' drawings.
Now, these paintings are based on coloring books that feature important Black leaders and Black historical figures throughout all of history in the U.S. Seeing as though next month is Black History Month, can you explain why you chose these particular images?
So it's the moment when educators are trying to figure out, how do you teach Black history? So they create these coloring books that have images that any coloring book would have in them. Boys playing basketball, juxtaposed with images of people like Harriet Tubman. I thought this was going to be an easy project for me. I really had to kind of inhabit the way a kid would hold a crayon or paint a painting. Picasso said he had to spend his whole lifetime to learn to draw like a child, and I know what he means now. It's hard. But it was very instructive for me. That disconnect between what the kids imagine those images to be and what I, as an adult, bring to an image of, say, Malcolm X, was what the work was about.
Your work includes a stark contrast in value, meaning you use a lot of black and white in your paintings. However, you even use the concept of lightness and darkness in your neon works. Can you talk about how you came to use real light and shadow in your art?
I'd been to that point making paintings using black text on white backgrounds. So really just as a joke, I said, is there such a thing as black neon? And the owner of the shop, Matt, said, that's against the laws of physics, because black is the absence of light. But then we started talking about it a bit, and I realized that there was a way to do it, because one could take a neon tube and simply paint it black on the front. So it would read as a black letter or a line, but it would also read as neon, because there would be light coming from behind that black letter. And once I realized that was possible, it became the connection between my painting work and these neons using text. First neon was based on a little fragment of a Gertrude Stein novel called 3 Lies, and it says Negro Sunshine. I was interested in Gertrude Stein because she is interested in America, American history, trying to describe what America means, which I think is one of my projects too. For me, using neon was really about finding the connection between the work I was already doing and the neon. And until we had that discussion about black light, that hadn't happened.
I want to thank you, Mr. Ligon, for coming on our show to talk a little bit about your art process and showing us a glimpse into how it is that you've become a great artist. Well, folks, that's all the time we have. I'm Edna Egelhofer. Good night.
This has been another rendition of Art News with Edna Egelhofer. Good night.